Thank you, Mike. Amazing idea of how to make this work. You know, passing laws is one thing. Trying to get our government to believe that we passed these laws and making them work is going to require a lot of happening things in courtrooms. And Joe Grumbine has an idea of how to do this, and I'm all for it. Here you go, Joe.
All right, thank you very, very much. I want to start off by thanking Kitty and Jeremy for inviting me up here. I'm coming up here from Southern California. I got a lot of things to say and not a lot of time to say it in, so I want to get everybody's attention for a second. Yeah.
I want you really to listen to this man, because this is a man that might save your asses if you go to jail. He's going to teach you about jury nullification. That's teaching the jury of your peers what the fuck is up. So listen to this man.
Thank you. Thank you. So I got a couple of questions. First of all, this is going to require a little bit of audience participation. So first of all, I want everybody to clap their hands if they realize that we have a problem with prohibition in America. Woo! All right, a few people are getting it. A few people. How many of you, if you knew that there was something you could directly do to change it, to end prohibition, would do something today? Woo! And how many of you wouldn't? Nobody. Okay, so half of you are paying attention. Hopefully the rest of you will begin. I'm here to tell you how we can make a difference. We've got a lot of good news and a lot of bad news. The good news is standing here today is different than it was 20 years ago. We have 19 states now with laws that allow for medical and even recreational use in America. 20 years ago, we didn't have anything. Everybody went to jail no matter where you were. Okay? I applaud the state of Washington for the legalization efforts that you've made. Your movement has come together in a way that California couldn't. After 17 years of a medical law, we haven't been able to pull it together the way you guys have. That's some of the good news. The bad news is we have a thing called the federal government, and they don't care what your state law says. They don't give a damn. If you grow one single plant, the federal government will throw you in prison. They don't care one bit. So we need to make some changes. Okay, all of this state legalization things that are happening, it's great. We need to stand up. Abraham Lincoln said, with public sentiment, anything is possible. And without it, nothing is possible. So at this point today, the will of the people is that it's okay for prohibition, because we have not stood up. For every single person that grows, transports, or smokes cannabis or ingests it in any way, there's probably 1,000 or 5,000 of us for one that's willing to stand up and do anything about it. And that is why we keep getting thrown in jail for a plant. And that is what needs to change, and that's what we can change starting here, starting today. When I got invited to speak here, I put the word out to the group. We're a nationwide group, a grassroots organization with little chapters all over the place. We support over 40 prisoners in jail today because of this plan, in federal prison and state prisons all across America. And I asked the prisoners, what do you want me to talk about? I've got an opportunity to talk to some people I don't know. And I got a bunch of feedback. And you know what most of it was? It says, talk about freedom. Talk about liberty. Talk about what this nation was founded on. And make sure people are aware that it's not what you think. Okay? This nation was founded on the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as an inalienable right, something we're all born with. And yet, when it comes time to stand up for it, we don't do it very much. Almost 80 years ago, as a result of a campaign of misinformation, lies, deception, America was duped into allowing cannabis to be illegal. And less than a year later, the first federal prisoner was taken as a result of this plant. Okay? And since that time, America has risen and become the largest per capita prison system of the whole entire world. We have over 2 million prisoners, and many of them are there for nonviolent offenses, and many of them are there for possession, cultivation, or distribution of cannabis. The same thing that we're here to celebrate, we have thousands of Americans in prison. America spends $60 billion a year on its prison system. Okay? $60 billion. You know what we could do with that? We could end poverty. We could have roads. We could have power. We could have anything we want. But instead we put each other in prison. Okay? And then we pay for them. If you realize that 1 in 32 Americans is in our system, whether it's parole, probation, or one of the elements of being in the system, you might think twice about standing up and fighting. When Kristen and Kitty were talking about the people that stood up in federal court in a trial, and they talk about them standing up for our rights, there's nothing more true than that. Even in state court, I've stood up. Many people that I know have stood up and said, you know what, I'm not going to take your deal. I don't care if it's a no jail deal. This is wrong. I am not guilty of a crime. Okay? And these people that stand up in federal court are fucking heroes. And we need to acknowledge them, and we need to remember them, and we need to be there for them. There are more and more people that are being arrested for cannabis, and most of them take a deal, and most of them do not go to trial, and when they do, we need to all be there. Okay, we have a prison outreach program with the Human Solution, and the Tacoma Farmers Market's doing the same thing, and we're joining forces a little bit. In federal prison, you don't get shoes, you don't get any medicine, you don't get edible food unless somebody's putting money on your books. And unless we're raising money for these prisoners, they get nothing. And unless we're communicating and giving them a little bit of support and hope, they don't have any. Okay? I've been to jail for pot. It is the worst place to be, and it was just a state situation. Okay? It couldn't be worse when you're in a cement box with no rights and nothing. Okay? For a plant. We can make a difference here, and I'm going to talk about a few ways that we can do this. There's a thing called jury nullification, and this is something that there's information out there. People are starting to talk about it a little bit. But imagine if you had a power that puts you with the same level of power as the governor of your state or the president of the United States, where you could actually veto a law. When you go to court, whether it's state or federal court, the judge will tell you, you will listen to me. I will give you the law and you will do what I say. But what he doesn't tell you is that if you don't, there's not a damn thing he can do about it. And what he doesn't tell you is that in New Hampshire, one state, they passed a law that allows the jury to be told about this. And guess what? In New Hampshire, that one state where the jury heard about it, they acquitted a man in a federal case on a religious defense. And he would have been found guilty had they not known about this. There's a free man today that stood up for his rights in a federal case, and the jury did the right thing one time. Each one of us, when we get a jury summons, instead of what we normally do and say, oh, I'm not going to that, think about it. You're being given an opportunity to possibly give a man freedom. In our system, you must be found guilty unanimously. One vote that says no, not guilty. That man will walk free on a hung jury at very least. And if you got some stones, you can step up and convince the other jurors that they too can do the same thing. And this could be the end of prohibition by itself. With alcohol prohibition, people stopped convicting, and that was one of the key points. Alcohol prohibition was a million times harder to fix than cannabis prohibition. It was a constitutional amendment. What we have is a simple law. We could change this with a wave of a pen and it would all be over. And I'm going to tell you one way that we can do it. a conservative Republican in California named Dana Rohrabacher submitted a bill called H.R. 1523 in April. And this bill, if it goes to law, will make the federal government respect states' rights with regards to cannabis laws. It's going to change the Controlled Substances Act. Currently, there are 18 co-sponsors out of more than 400 congresspeople. How many of you know who your congressman is? Raise your hand.
Probably not.
About 7. Okay. It's time to change that. How many of you ever communicated with your congressman? 3. Okay, great. 18 congressmen out of over 400 are co-sponsoring this. If this becomes law, Washington will not have raids, because that's how the law will go. If this becomes law, you will have a federal defense if you're following state law. This will be the beginning of the end of prohibition. It requires us to make a decision. I'm going to ask everybody today to do something. Everything starts with a thought. If you want to end prohibition today, make the decision to think that I'm going to do something to end prohibition today. And then make a decision to take an action, some small thing, I don't care what it is. Don't just show up at a meeting. Decide to do something. Speak out. Maybe share some information. Maybe show up at court for somebody. Maybe write a letter to a prisoner, but something. And when you make that decision to be a part of the end of prohibition, it will happen. For every one of us that stand up, there's 1,000 that could and should and might. And if we can encourage this to spread, this will end. With public sentiment, anything is possible, including the end of prohibition, and we can be the solution. Thank you very much.
Joe Grumbine, listen to him. Listen to him. He's got a point. Get off your stoner ass. Right? It's easy to